Hi everyone. So today we're joined by Carrie Mason. So thank you so much for joining us. It's a real pleasure to see you. So we'll dive straight in. So you were, over the course of the last few weeks, you've been at the Prison Residencies project. So would you be able to tell us just a little overview of your arts practice?
Yeah, nice to be talking to you today. So my practice is, I would say, kind of drawing based. At the heart of it is kind of repetitive mark making, but I'm quite interested in how we experience time and place and kind of in the real world. So it's a kind of looking at the kind of physicality of a place and materials and being really present in that time and place. So it's a kind of reaction against the kind of virtual and digital world that we're increasingly becoming in more and more involved with. And it's kind of wanting to have a real experience, and how that can kind of how I try and express that in what I'm making.
So your practice seems so fitting for the prison project. Obviously there was a theme of time previously in your work and through the project. How were you able to develop your ideas specifically for the prison residency?
Yeah, well, obviously over the last year, with being restricted and working at home, my practice and the work became more and more about time and how we experience time, especially in different situations. Because we couldn't go out to places, I was working at home, and the focus just became more and more about marking time every day that we were restricted in lockdown. And so the invitation to come to the prison and work in the cell was just so great, and it really kind of followed on really nicely from the work I've been doing in my kind of studio cell to take it into a different environment that had so much history is just dripping from the walls in that place. And it's a very different environment, and so I kind of I went thinking I was going to be making lots of durational drawings that linked to the time, the activities that prisoners, inmates would be doing. And I through our researcher Dave, he found me the 1879 daily schedule of what staff and inmates would do. So what time the bell would go, when they would start work, when they'd have breakfast, and all that kind of thing. And I was quite interested in sort of working in blocks of time that related to their activities. I really focused on just being in my cell. The prison's a huge place, but I figured that if you were there, you wouldn't be roaming around it. You would be in your cell, or perhaps moving around on the wing. So I kind of spent all my time in the cell, and a lot of it ended up staring at the wall. I went thinking I was going to be doing lots of really heavily worked graphite rubbings that would kind of capture the sort of textures in that cell environment. But that changed really quickly, and I've been reflecting sort of since I came at home, that I wondered whether my thoughts before I went in about the choice of material, the sort of graphite, was maybe connected with my thinking about the prison as an outsider looking in, thinking about going. You think about the outside of the building with its huge grey stone, austere, the stone walls, and it is very kind of grey, and I think that's possibly why I was thinking I was going to do that. But then by by the Sunday, so just the second day in there, I noticed that the light on a sunny day in my cell was it was just quite mesmerizing. On a sunny day, I'd get these bright spots of light on the cell wall in the morning, and they'd move across the space. But by midday they had gone, and then in the afternoon there was a kind of different, softer light. And I just spent some time sat in the cell, sat on my bed, and I just got really interested in watching the light move in the space, and it felt like this idea of doing these heavy graphite rubbings, it just wasn't right, and that the work needed to be about the light, and it needed to be white, and it needed to be much more delicate than I had thought that I was going to be doing. So it's really interesting to see how very quickly the environment influenced what was going to be happening.
Yeah, definitely. And your work did become a lot softer. And like we mentioned, we had a little chat before about this concept of time. Obviously, the light was such a governing point of that, because there was no clocks, were there, in your cell at all?
No, there was no clocks. They would have had no way of telling the time of day apart from when the morning bell went, or or perhaps different activities like lunch, dinner was served and things like that. So I kind of thought that, actually, if you were in that cell, the light would have been everything. And it became a way of telling the time of day. Just in that short space of time I was there, I could tell when it was midday, because the light had moved, it had changed. And I started thinking about, if you were there day in, day out for months, then the light would be different at different times of the year. It was a constant in some respects, in that on rainy days, cloudy rainy days, there was no light, so it was really, really gloomy. But there was still nothing else there apart from the light, so it became everything in that space. And I just needed to work with it, I think, and it did influence the choice of materials. I started working just with paper and just with white ink, and it all became about the light and what the light was doing, which was surprised me, but it was also, I really felt like I was watching time. And on the first day that it was really rainy and gloomy and I didn't have that bright light, it really affected my mood in the cell. I felt really quite glum, quite sort of it was just it had a really different atmosphere. So that even more so made me feel like if you were in there, you would be clinging to the days when that light was there, and it felt really special.
Yeah, definitely. It's really interesting seeing how many of the artists stayed within their cell for the duration of the residency, but you did break out on a couple of occasions. How was that process of coming out of the cell? And obviously there was other women working on the residency as well, so could you tell us a little bit about your overall experience working with others and coming out of your cell a little bit?
Yeah, sure. It was really lovely to be back working with other artists again. I have so missed having those conversations and being able to discuss the work. I was conscious that I was possibly might have seemed to be a bit antisocial because my work was really ended up focusing on this one patch of wall. I'd come in the morning, and that I needed on a sunny day, there was an hour when I could catch that light. So I'd come in and I would just go straight into this drawing and wouldn't stop for an hour. But then I would find that I tried to make sure I had a break at lunchtime, and on a nice day go outside for a bit. And the conversations that we were having about each other's work and each other's practices, it was just so lovely to have those connections. And I feel like I've really made friendships, that long-lasting friendships.
Good.
And not just with the artists who were on site. So kind of having online conversations with the artists that weren't there was just as important, and feeling like it did feel like they were with us, because their work was just like next door,
Yeah.
So and I think it kind of varied. There would be some days when I didn't have the light at all, and what I'd kind of gone in planning to work and I could barely see anything in my cell, and I'd probably go off and chat a little bit more. And then some days I would just take a chair and sit in the main space, and I'd work outside the cell door, which was it's much lighter, so you get a better light, but you also feel like you're a bit more part of everything that's going on, and it's a little bit easier to engage with the visitors and things when you were outside of the cell. But yeah, I was kind of conscious that I was so focused on my wall that but I was quite happy for the others to come in and talk to me while I was working, but I just couldn't stop drawing for that period of time. But no, it's a really great bunch of artists. We all kind of got on really well, and I think all those think that helps. But everybody was really supportive and encouraging the others to develop their practice, to develop their work, and that was really lovely.
Yeah, because within your cell, you're very much not, when people think of you working on the wall, most people would think, oh, you're in the middle of that space, kind of taking up the wall space, but you weren't. You were right in the back in the corner because that's where the light came in, isn't it? Because the window is very high up. And that was, I found another really interesting point, that you were not only in your cell, you were scrunched up in the corner, because that's where you had
right
to be.
In the corner. Yeah, I was.
And there was a point, wasn't there, where you moved some of your work out of your space, and then you started to, obviously from your start time of the residency, you started making the impression of the bed in paper. Could you tell us a bit about your shift from the mark making to the physical objects?
Yeah, sure. Well, the bed, the bed is like a metal bed frame. When you look at it in a picture, it looks like it might be sprung. It's not. It's really solid,
very rigid.
And on the first day, I covered it in a massive sheet of paper, and tucked it all in as close as I could. And that was with the idea that I was going to make a graphite rubbing of the whole bed surface. And I was going to spend, not all in one time, but as an accumulation, I was going to spend 9.5 hours doing this graphite rubbing, which related to the time from lights out until when the cell was unlocked the following day. And I covered the bed, and then I went to cover the door because I was going to do a similar thing with the door, but that entailed shutting the door. And as soon as I shut the door, I felt really uncomfortable in the cell. So I was like, nope, not doing that, not ready for that yet. And I kind of just sat on the bed and was just like, okay, so how am I going to do the door if I don't shut the door, if I can't shut it? And then I kind of then, it was the end of the day, and I came back on the Sunday, and with a view to sort of starting, but then reminded myself that on Sundays the prisoners wouldn't work, and they would spend time in prayer and divine service for like 5 hours. So I thought, no, I can't start doing the rubbings today, because that would be work. I need to do the prayer thing today. And I started working with the light on the wall, because I felt like the light was kind of a divine light. It was just so beautiful in that really not beautiful space. And every so often I'd go and sit on the bed and look at the light, and then I realized that actually the paper was taking the form of the bed with me just sitting on it. And it looked like a sheet. People thought it was sheet. They'd come in and they thought I'd covered the bed in a sheet, and I quite liked that. And I thought, oh, actually, I quite like what's happening. I'm kind of embossing the paper just by sitting on it.
Yeah.
And and I kind of thought, well, there's something happening here. I'm not going to start doing the graphite rubbing yet. I'm going to leave it, and maybe I'm going to do 2. And I sit on the bed for a week, and then I do another one with the graphite rubbing. But actually, the longer it was on the bed and the more it started to take the form and the shape, the more I just thought, actually, no, this just needs to be it. It needs to just be about the weight and the pressure of the person in, you know, sitting on that space. So I ended up, rather than doing a graphite drawing, I ended up sitting and laying in short periods of time because it was too uncomfortable, for a total of 9.5 hours, and kind of really making sure I kind of did that over the whole of the bed frame. And then after that period of time, we took the paper off the bed and it held the shape. So there wasn't enough room in my cell to put it really next to it. So we took it out and it started kind of moving around the space then after that. So we moved it next door to the servery area, which was quite a big space, just to photograph it, because I didn't know if it was just going to collapse after a while. So we put it in that space, and it stayed there. And it was really interesting because it did look like a bed covered in a sheet, but it was just paper. Overnight it did collapse a little bit, the damp air, and it could kind of just sag a little bit more. But it stayed like it. We had great fun in the middle of the night on our sleepover, photographing the work in the middle space by torchlight. So it became this kind of ghost bed. And then we just kind of popped it in the corner as if it was just another bed made up, waiting to be sit on, but it was just paper. So
it really did look like it was draped, and again it looked quite soft in a very, very rigid, hard environment. It all turned out beautifully well. And as you just mentioned, you were one of the ladies that stayed overnight in the prison. How was that experience for you? Because obviously by this point you'd spent most of your time then on the residency there in person in the daytime, but not overnight yet. So if you just tell us a little bit about that experience, change of setting, I suppose.
It was the Friday of the last week, so we only had a couple more days to go, and I think there was 6 of us all together stayed over. It was really good. It was interesting to do, and I was ready to do it by then. I don't think I could have done it at the beginning. I think it would have been felt a bit too much, but I think the group had really kind of gelled, and so I knew I was in a supportive environment, because it was a little bit scary. And I'd kind of gone, I'll do it, and then afterwards thought, I hope this is going to be a good idea. It was fun. There was a moment about 6 o'clock when everybody in the evening, when all the visitors and everybody had gone and it had gone quiet, and all of the other artists disappeared, and I was in the wing all on my own.
Oh gosh.
Well, I think I was. I think actually there were some others, but they were just around, but they were just really quiet. And I thought, oh gosh, what on earth have I done? Why am I going to be spending the night here? This is just crazy. And then I went out, and then I sort of found some of the others very quickly. I think I went over to the loo, and they were over there. So I was just like, no, it's going to be fine. So I had this little moment of a wobble. But it was actually fine. I was plenty warm enough. I think we were all worried about being cold. I could have done with more padding on my I took loads like yoga mats and things like that, but it was still quite uncomfortable. But I think, to be honest, I was so tired by that point that I could have slept on a washing line. So I got probably more sleep than I had been getting at home. And from my perspective, having been kind of watching the light and staring at the wall in myself for nearly 2 weeks by that point. And I'd made quite a lot of the pieces of work had kind of come together by the time we did the sleepover. So I didn't really put any pressure on myself to do anything during the sleepover other than just be there and experience it. And I just took photos every few hours as the light went because of my window, because the window seemed to be, you know, everything about being in that cell. And we sent out for pizza. We might have had a gin or tonic or two.
It was a good time.
Deirdre and I had a little party in our cell. And then, yeah, we had some great fun at midnight. Victoria wore her costume and walked around in torchlight with her carrying a lantern. It was beautiful. So we took lots of photos of her. And then I had the sort of sudden thought, oh, I need to photograph the bed. So we got the bed out and photographed that. And it's like, what do artists do on a sleepover? They keep working, don't they? So by 1:30 in the morning, we were just so tired that we could have slept anywhere. And it was fine. I really enjoyed it.
Good.
In a strange way.
Oh, it's really good to hear. And just picking up on, obviously there were other women with you during the time of the residency. Was there any chance for collaborations or crossovers of work at all with the other artists?
Yeah, definitely. I think some people were working together more than others. I'm quite conscious that I can be quite, as I say, antisocial in my work because I kind of get in this zone and I zone everything else out. But Victoria had these beautiful little glass jars with a cork in, and she gave one to all of the artists to collect a memory in, which I just thought was just a beautiful way of us all working together. And I wrote, so for that piece I did like a text piece, and I sat for an hour writing the word time and rubbing it out over and over again. And I collected the rubbings and put them in her jar and gave it to her and said, here is an hour of time that I'd collected it. So that was a really lovely piece. And I think I had lots of conversations with the other artists about what they were doing. And I think that there's definitely, there's going to be scope for things to happen in the future. I feel like we'll all stay in touch, and that because we got to know how each other work really well, and where there are common interests and crossovers, that's going to just naturally happen now that we'll maybe get involved in projects together. And I mean, there's just so much work you could still do at the prison. There was Polly came back from having a wander about and said, oh, in the exercise yard it says that they walked anti-clockwise, but why did they do that? And then we did some sort of discovering, and it was because it's to turn back time. So I've got to do a piece of work at some point in the prison yard, but I felt like I didn't have time to think it through, that it would be rushed and pressured, and I was trying to kind of do something before we finished, and then I decided, actually no, it was feeling like I was going to rush it, and it needed to be something that I could have time to think about. So but that linked in with Victoria was doing a lot of walking around the prison yard, and she was counting steps, and I can see there's like crossovers in the way that we work, even though our outcomes are very different. We've got similar interests and similar ways of kind of making marks and recording things and documenting things. So I think there's scope for a lot more. I know some of the remote artists were working with each other and collaborating as well. It's definitely, and it's going to be more, I'm sure, happening.
Oh yeah, there just seems so much room to keep going. Like everyone that I've spoken to so far has all the artists have commented and said that they definitely don't feel finished with their project, so it's something they could pick up and look at a totally different avenue from what they've researched. So yeah, it's just really wonderful to hear that it's not just the end of the residency period, and it is something that could really influence your work going forward. And speaking of going forward, is there anything you have on the horizon?
At the moment, I'm trying to put the images that I took of my work in the cell into a little book, because I kind of felt like it all related so much to that space. It was the photographs and seeing it in that space. So that's a little project I've got on the go at the moment that might work. Not done a book before. And then I've got a residency coming up in March, which is very, very different, but I'm very much looking forward to it, which is in Cornwall on the edge of a cliff, basically.
Yeah.
Looking at the sea. So it'll be time and tide, I think, is I've got a kind of ongoing interest in working with the sea and salt water, and trying to show the passage of time through changing materials. So that one's going to start kind of taking a bit more of a center stage, hopefully, after I've spent a week in Cornwall on the edge of a cliff, dangling things in the sea. And yeah, just kind of more drawing, more making, and playing with materials.
Brilliant. Well, we really look forward to your upcoming projects, and just keep going, keep marking the time that you have.
I will.
Thank you so much for your conversation today, and we hope to speak to you soon.
Thank you.